Good evening, everyone. Well, let me start by saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Welcome everyone to our Montessori village. Through the years, Montessori Children's House, White Rock Montessori, and Lumen Education have supported one another in their mission to raise awareness of the fact that Montessori is education for life and for the whole child, mind, body, and heart. Tonight, we come together as a Montessori village because through our regular conversations among heads of school, we have discovered that we are all noticing the same things in our classrooms. We notice, for example, that the younger children are having difficulty separating from their parents in the morning. That natural desire to engage with the environment and explore that is characteristic of the 3 to 6-year-old child seems to be needing a little bit of gentle coaxing from the teachers. We notice that our elementary children, that developmentally speaking are the social butterflies of the developmental chart, are having difficulty navigating and negotiating social situations. And that through no fault of their own, they seem to have learned to equate learning with screens and keyboards. During the 2.5 years of the pandemic, we all did the best we could with the resources we had. We did that to keep our children safe and healthy and learning. And we understand as school communities that this challenge was particularly burdensome to you parents, because from one moment to the next, you had to become everything to everyone, work a full-time job from home and maintain your productivity, cut down or completely shut down support networks to minimize interactions with people from outside your household, become full-time teachers, nurses, housekeepers, technology gurus, to ensure that your children were healthy and learning. And you had to do all this while trying to keep up with CDC guidelines and the latest information on the situation. To say that it was a lot is an understatement. But you did it. You did it. You pulled your families through one of the most extraordinary times of our lifetime. And we know that in order to do that, you probably had to use some creative parenting strategies just to make it possible for you to manage the constant demands on your time and your attention. We, as school communities, had to do the same thing. We had to come up with some pretty interesting strategies that in normal times would sound absolutely crazy. Things like, don't touch the materials, you have your own, work with those. Things like, if you need to leave your seat, please raise your hand. There's that social distance thing we have to keep track of. Things like, don't get too close to people. What? It was crazy. And we did what we had to do in order to get through those very rough times. Now, we as adults have had the life experience to know that those were very unusual and temporary circumstances. We all know what normal looks like, and that's why we can make that switch, from what was then to this normal physical and social environment with, a certain degree of ease and trust that things are going to be fine. Well, for the children, it's not quite that easy, especially for those children, those 3, 4, 5-year-olds, whose first experiences of life were acquired in an environment where the priority was to keep them safe and physically healthy. Sometimes at the expense of other equally important developmental priorities like self-regulation and independence. Tonight, we are having this first conversation, there'll be more, about how to get our children back on the path to develop that self-regulation and independence. Both of these very basic developmental tasks are intrinsically linked to secure attachment, to mom, to dad, to significant caregiver. And this secure attachment creates in the child a feeling of safety and trust. Now, the thing is that in order to maintain that feeling of safety and trust, children must have self-guided interactions with the environment. They must experience their power to move, their power to choose, their power to take care of themselves, others, and the environment. Because it is through these experiences that they will build one of the main psychological structures to create a healthy, positive self-image. A self-image of, I am able and capable. I can do stuff all by myself. Now, I have a little bit of just housekeeping stuff before we move on to talk about this process. We kindly ask you to please not take pictures or video during the presentation. As you can see, we're having the session recorded, and we will send the link to the video to all of you. That way the panel doesn't get distracted with phones and lights and things. That was a public service announcement. Now back to our regular programming. Tonight, to help us understand this process of attachment and separation and what it means to the development of self-regulation and independence, we have invited our very own Stan Ferguson. Stan is, thank you. Stan is a licensed professional counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and the author of the book, What Parents Need to Know About Children. Now, for the first 30 minutes of the presentation, Stan is going to be sharing with us his insights as a therapist. And then I'm going to ask a few questions from a Montessori perspective. The remaining time we will use to answer your questions. You will find that you have an index card and a pencil under your chair for you to write questions. And at the end of the presentation, Rachel is going to pick them up and read them to the panel, our heads of school, and to us, and we will try to find answers for you. So, on that note, please help me welcome Stan Ferguson.
Well, I'm really glad to be here tonight, and I have to confess to you that I enjoyed thinking about this talk. I really did. I kind of, in your handout you see I talk about 3 big, beautiful ideas. That's a little bit audacious, but I love a good idea. And I'm going to go through exactly why I think these ideas and another model that I created just for tonight are so important to this issue of how do we have a secure child how do we have an independent child, and how do we help children regulate their emotions? And so those are kind of the three challenges that I took upon myself. I didn't invent all these ideas. They're thoroughly researched. I've packaged them in a way that I think are making them accessible to all of us. And you'll have your chance to ask questions a little bit later on in order to fine-tune them to your situation. I do want you to know that I am the father of 2 daughters who got fine Montessori educations. And I'm the grandfather of 3 granddaughters who got fine Montessori education. So I am not a Montessori guide, but I'm a big fan. I've always seen it being congruent with all the things that I'm learning about. I'm a big fan of Marie Montessori, and I think she had some incredible insights. In fact, one of the things I want to do is actually read a Montessori quote to get started that I think is important. And we did mention that there's going to be kind of a focus on the first 3 years of life. But what I want you to understand, every one of these ideas, every concept we talked about tonight, goes again and again and again and again. And that's just the way nature works. It's like a big nautilus shell. It starts from one place and it just keeps going around and around and around. In fact, I'm going to quote Tina Turner later on. So let's start with a Maria Montessori quote, which I think, and I did spend some time several years ago for a presentation studying, the whole attachment theory and the history of developing the attachment theory. And so it was then that this quote really stood out in my mind. She said, "The development of the child in the first 3 years of birth, 3 years after birth, is unequaled in intensity and importance by any period that precedes or follows in the whole life of the child. If we consider the transformations, adaptations, achievements, conquest of the environment during the first period of life from 0 to 3 years, it is functionally a longer period than all the following periods together from 3 years unto death. For this reason, these 3 years may be considered to be as long as a whole life." So what I wanted to, one, that is a profound statement, and a lot of people relate to the party understanding the importance of the first 3 years of life. I just want to say that. But I also want to say this is so basic that it's going to keep coming up again and again and again at every stage of your child's development. So don't be worried if you have a teenager. You're not going to be left out. But we will focus on some of these things because they're so basic. Okay, let's see here. In your handout, you'll see the first one is the 3 big, beautiful ideas right there. And I mentioned there, and I'm going to kind of pull an old, I actually, before I became a psychotherapist, I was an ordained minister for a while. And so this is an old homiletics thing. I'm going to, from how to do a sermon, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So the emotional language of the child is an incredibly important idea that we're going to talk about. That includes something that sounds kind of technical, mutual emotional reciprocal interactions. That phrase comes from this big thick book, The First Idea. Greenspan and Shanker were the first to really understand the importance of how those mutual emotional reciprocal interactions form the foundation of the child's first idea. And I'm going to tell you what that idea is. So That's one thing we're going to do. The short for that is called serve and return. You may have heard that before. It's a nice, neat, nifty way to describe it. It's less technical. And we all have played ping pong or tennis or pickleball or something. I haven't played pickleball yet, but I've heard about it. So we kind of understand this sort of back and forth interaction that happens. We're going to talk about that a lot. We're going to talk about attachment and the tension in attachment, getting so close to our child with this idea of letting go, and how both of those things complement and work together. And again, that keeps happening again and again and again at every stage of your child's life. And then we're also going to focus on this issue of safety or security. And I'm going to illustrate how inadvertently parents often focus on safety on the outside. And we're going to discuss what safety on the inside is and why that's really where we want to go if we want to find independence in the child. So let's start with the emotional language of the child. You know, we all know that children have no spoken language at birth. But they do have an innate ability to both express emotions and receive emotions from other people. And in fact, they have an innate ability to not just perceive whether there's risk and reward in their physical environment or their interpersonal environment. By the time they're just a few months old, they are masters at reading the human face. They know if you're tired. They know if you're stressed out. They know if you're happy. They know if you're irritable. They know if you're incredibly affectionate and just, at that moment. So this emotional language of the child is actually the child's first language. And I had this aha moment as I was preparing this talk when I realized, oh, and it happens to be the only universal human language. And I came up with that idea because I had a thought experiment. And I thought, what would happen if you put me in a home in every country on the planet with a parent with a 2-week-old? Could I relate to that baby? And I realized I could. I don't know the language. I don't need to know the language. I can speak the emotional language of the infant or even the toddler, and I can communicate something that says, I'm interested in you, I understand you, I accept the way that you're living, I'm glad you're on the planet, that sort of thing. So it's very important for us to understand how important this first language of the child, this emotional language is, and how it relates to this question of security, independence, and especially emotional regulation. So exactly how does that interaction look like? So at this point, where I'm going to do some demonstrations, and we'll see how this works out. I don't know. It's all a big experiment. So I'm going to get my baby. All right. Here's my baby. And I want to warn you something, too. We're going to talk a little bit more about it in just a minute, but there's some neurological and some hormonal things that go on in terms of infancy, childbirth and infancy, and in parents, and even in people like me, fathers. But if you hand me your infant, if you're kind enough to do that, and I will be very happy to hold your infant for any amount of time I get, you may notice that I might sneak a smell of their head. I can't help it. It's just going to happen, you know, because it's intoxicating, and it elicits a huge oxytocin kind of burst in my body when that happens. So let's just pretend that this baby, it's night, and this baby has just woken up and is not real happy about something. I know that the baby's awake. You know how, right? The baby's awake, and it's, oh, yeah, something's going on. You were asleep, and now you're awake, and you're not feeling too good. Yeah, well, Daddy's here. He's going to see what he can do to take care of you. I'm just going to check something right here, right now, and just see, oh, you know what? Your little diaper's kind of wet. No wonder you're not feeling very good. Yes, well, let's take care of that. Now I take care of that, right? And then, oh, well, you're dry and you're clean now, but you still seem to be a little bit upset. Something's just not quite right. Let's just see if some milk would be nice for you right now. Okay. Oh, you're really drinking up that milk right now. Yes. That sounds like you were hungry. Yeah. Now you're feeling better. Yeah. Starting to close your eyes. Yes, that's what you needed. You needed to change your diaper, and you needed to have some milk. All right. Well, Daddy's going to be here, and I'm just going to rock you and hold you till you fall asleep. So that's mutual, emotional, reciprocal interaction. And you might say, well, okay, what's the reciprocal part? Well, actually, at this point, the baby is all service, right? I'm noticing the baby's reaction. I heard the cry, and I'm noticing to see whether she looks comfortable or not. It's a she, because I have 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters. And so she is serving to me, and I'm being very observant, as every good Montessori parent should be. Observation is the key to the Montessori method, and the method arose from the child, right? That's what Marie said. So, so the child is serving, and I'm responding to what I see, and every little subtle indication about whether she's calming down. And I'm going to share a little bit. I'm also doing some other things that we'll talk about in just a minute, but I'm actually lending this child a part of my neurological system. It's not fully developed in this baby yet. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But now I want to have a demonstration of serve and return with an older child, just to convince you that the wheel keeps turning, okay?
Stan?
Yes.
I have a question before you
All
move
right.
on to, like, I noticed that you were constantly talking to the baby, because I know, from my own children, that they cry in the middle of the night, and
Right.
yes, I'll get up, I'll
Sure.
change the diaper, I'll get the bottle, but I don't necessarily get into that conversation. So my question, and I know there's a purpose, and I want to hear from you, what difference does that make to this
well,
infant?
the purpose is that I want to send an emotional signal to the child. And it's not about the words I use. The child will learn over time to associate certain words with certain meaning. That will happen, and it happens remarkably quickly, as they pick up speed. But the most important thing is not, that's why I could go to any home with a 2-week-old in it, and it doesn't matter if I'm speaking English and if they speak Chinese. It just does not matter, because I'm speaking in an emotional language. And we're going to see a little bit later that emotional language, it helps with all sorts of things, but especially with emotional regulation in infants. And again, the baby has a neurological gap that lasts till about 11 months or 12 months, so that they can't calm themselves down neurologically the way we can calm ourselves down. So, so that's why I would do it. Also, I'm a trained play therapist, and I intuitively notice, describe, and track children's behavior all the time. And what I notice of the ones that are old, 3 years old and above, they really like it. They like to be noticed. They like to think I'm interested. I'm proving to them, I notice every little thing about you, So part of it's a habit, but I do think it's not that I do think some parents discount the importance of speaking to a child who doesn't speak.
Right.
But we know in terms of language acquisition that actually is a mistake. They need to hear all these syllables. That 2-year-old in Afghanistan that I want to hold right now if I can, they're going to hear all sorts of sounds and stuff that I can't even make, but they will be tuned to those sounds and they will speak within those sounds at some point. So, okay, does that answer? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Very good. Now, is there anyone who would like to be a 5 or 6-year-old child for just a couple of minutes?
You can volunteer or Stan can choose somebody.
Oh, no. Oh, great. Super. Super. Thank you for doing that. Now, the idea is not to humiliate me. The idea is to...
Same for me as well.
Okay. Well, great. Well, we've got some toys here, and what I want you to know is that we've got lots of toys here, and you can play with these toys in many of the ways you'd like to play.
Okay.
Okay. So, I see you kind of, you've grabbed something already. You found a couple of things you already enjoy.
Yeah.
You're rolling that around. Oh, that's going to take a ride on top of that thing. You found something else that's interesting. Oh, that seems to fly through the air. Yeah. Well, you're finding all sorts of things that interest you. Oh, and the dinosaur's taking a ride too. Right. That particularly is fun. You like rolling that around. It went up the table. Now it's, okay. Oh, so you found something else that looks interesting. You're looking at it all over. You decide to put it back down. Now you've discovered something else. Look what you found. Huh. See, you stack those things together. You're discovering all sorts of ways to play with these things. You see if you can stack them all up. You're going to try again. And it fell down. And now you've got them. You've decided to put them back in now. And the last one right there. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That was fun.
Okay, good. So, let's see here. So those are some demonstrations of just how we do a serve and return or a mutual emotional reciprocal interaction. And let me see where I am at this point. Okay. Now, if a child receives, and again, you notice my tendency is to really give the child plenty of signals that I'm interested in them, either emotionally, in my tone, or observing their behavior and their actions, without judgment, but interest, that sort of thing.
Stan,
yes.
I'm sorry. That's one thing I noticed, when you were tracking what the child was doing, that you didn't use evaluative adjectives like,
No.
oh, it's flying through the air, there was no, oh, that's wonderful, or you're so smart, or oh, what a great choice that was.
Right.
So, can you
What-
speak to that? What
Well,
is the value of?
what I think you're going to find, and I mentioned it in my book, the first 5 chapters of the book are all about how to interact with children both whether they're feeling happy or whether they're emotional and in distress. But one of the things a couple of things. When I go into a classroom, I have to be really careful not to be a disruption. And it's not because, and I will tell you, I'm going to confess this to you, twice in my life, once in a Montessori classroom, once in a regular classroom, I had a child walk up to me and ask, "Are you God?" Now,
It's the beard.
I don't think it has anything to do with my character or anything like that. Maybe the beard, I don't know. But what they notice is that there's something different about the way I interact with them. And so I have to be kind of careful or it can be a disruption because kids begin to kind of be real interested, in what I'm doing. But one of the things I never do is evaluate, criticize, or praise a child. And children, I'm not saying that an occasional pat on the back and the job well done is a problem. But children can become addicted to evaluation. They want to know, am I okay? Do you like me? Do you approve of me? Am I smart? All sorts of stuff. Can't tell you how many children have brought up a painting that they've made and asked me to be the art critic. Is this pretty? I refuse to answer that question, But I'll point to their painting and say, you've used so many colors in this painting. And you have really, let's see, you're making there's a red and blue and green and purple. Well, you're making one of those, it's a rainbow, Mr. Stan. Oh, you made a rainbow. Sounds like you're learning all about rainbows and all the colors that are in a rainbow, that sort of thing. So I acknowledge the child, but I don't praise the child. So that's why I don't use that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Stan.
Okay, so if a child receives lots of these positive, affirming, supportive, understanding interactions in the first year of life, what we hope will happen, what's the wonderful indication of the first step towards attachment, is the child feels hope. That's a major milestone in the child's life. They think, I think when I cry, somebody's going to show up. I think when I'm wet, somebody's going to dry me off and put a fresh diaper on. I think when I'm hungry, someone's going to give me food. So hope and trust, there's a famous theorist named Erickson who said hope is the first thing that needs to happen in attachment. Hope. A confident expectation that if I have a need, this parent figure is going to show up, that sort of thing. That's the first crucial step towards attachment. And what I want you to hear about attachment, why it's so important, is that once that positive, healthy attachment has occurred, every other relationship that the child will have in their life will be viewed through that lens. Can I have hope and trust? There's a famous theorist named Adler who talked about social interest. Well, social interest is based upon hope and trust, isn't it? I think I could play. I think I could play with those kids. We might have fun. That's a hopeful kind of experience. And so we want to have these we want to have these interactions so that first step occurs. Now let's think for a minute about what the infant's actual experience is in the beginning. And this is where we're going to start talking about neurology a little bit. The infant's first experience, emotional experiences, in research are often described as catastrophic. They simply are overwhelmed, both positively and negatively, by what they're experiencing. I want you to think about the first time you tasted asparagus as a child. It may have just spewed out across, I'm not saying that there's not some great kids who figure it out. But taste, smells. I mean, I love to cook. I love to bake. I do all the cooking in my home with my wife. And I wish I could smell and taste the way I did as a child. Because I think it's so sensitive and so responsive, but it can actually be overwhelming, right? So the child has a kind of an overwhelmed experience. The other thing that I mentioned earlier was that whereas when they're born, they have what's called a sympathetic nervous system response. That's an autonomic part of our brain and our neurology, which basically means it's automatic and unconscious. But it's constantly looking for risk and reward in the environment, and it's ready to respond instantly to, threat or to something that looks fun or desirable, something like that. And it's present at birth. The minute the baby is born, if it's too bright, if they're too cold, if it's too noisy, they're going to let you know it. Bang, they're going to cry. The other thing that needs to occur is what's called the parasympathetic. So when you think about sympathetic nervous system, just think gas pedal. When you think about the parasympathetic system, think brake. It's the rest and digest part of our response. It slows us down, it calms us down, it makes us feel safe. Hopefully for you, when you go home elicits the parasympathetic response. You think, I'm home. If we're lucky, that's what we feel. We feel, oh, this is great. I'm going to kick my shoes off. I'm going to have a nice meal, talk to my wife, read a good book. I'm home. That's a nice response. Well, infants don't have that fully effectively developed until they're 11 or 12 months. So we have to lend our parasympathetic nervous response to the baby. How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, one of the ways is that when the baby's upset, I'm calm. I'm talking too much. Calm. I'm just kidding, but I'm just saying I'm sending as many signals as I can. I mean, I could do it with an empathetic grunt if I wanted to. I could do that too. But I'm lending my system. I'm saying I'm calm, and I'm going to be calm with you and for you. I'm not going to add any more energy to the system. I'm not going to escalate with you. Go, oh no, you're crying. That wouldn't help, right? That's my sympathetic nervous system. They don't need my sympathetic. They've got a great one already. They need my parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm soothing, I'm calm, I'm rocking them, I'm meeting their basic needs. And that helps them to not be overwhelmed. And later on, they'll have a better parasympathetic response, and they'll be able to kind of recoup easier and better. But now they need my extra assistance.
So Sam, I'm thinking as you're talking about these little ones that have such a hard time separating from mom and dad in the morning at school, what would be the best way to lend your parasympathetic system in this moment?
Well, I mean, I do know that the dilemma at school is that as long as the parent's there, the child is going to be pretty, and these directors, and one thing I will say, I don't have to answer all the questions. We've got about 150 years worth of experience here on the right here that can help us with this. But my feeling is that one, I'm calm and reassuring to the child, even when they're still kind of agitated and unsure about this, and maybe they're going to kind of cry and moan about it a little bit. We see this a lot in the infant toddler community, where before they get normalized to the classroom, they're a little bit uneasy about this whole thing, and they may cry some. I try to reassure them, most of the time, once you're out of this situation, they calm themselves down. And that's when the caregiver is reassuring and soothing and calm. and is not freaked out because they're crying and not thinking, oh, this is a tragedy, but is also reassuring, and offers whatever they can to help comfort the child, maybe to distract them or give them something to do. There's a lot of different things you can do. So that would be my quick kind of response.
So it's like, don't get in the emotional roller coaster with the child.
Right.
You have to stay grounded and peaceful.
Yes.
So that your child can.
Right. We don't want to add any more energy
Yeah.
to the situation that's there, and we want to. And I am going to also talk about. Well, I won't get to that right now, but. So, and I wanted you to show you how this, like I said, Tina Turner, the big wheel keeps on turning. We're going to look at the circle of trust in a minute, and I hope that will be helpful too. But let's see, where was I? Oh, well, so anyway, here's what I was thinking. I lend my parasympathetic nervous system to adults all the time. I mean, I've had people who are literally undone emotionally. Something's happened, and I have to step in, and I'm calm, and I'm showing them that I care. I'm interested. I'm empathetic, but I'm not reacting in a way that adds any more fuel to it. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll get real close and I'll say, look at my eyes. Just look at my eyes and describe my face to you. Now, that can be a frightening experience for somebody to have this, this face. But I know that some human contact and focusing on something will help them calm down, and I'm real calm about it. And then I may say, let's just breathe together for a minute. Let's just breathe together. Let's breathe in and breathe out. Because breathing is another thing that helps regulate the parasympathetic response. So what I want to make sure you get is that this is not just about infants before the age of 12 months. It's something I use day in and day out all the time, even with grown-ups. So, okay, let's see here. Now let's go on to attachment and letting go. And basically, do you remember when you first realized you were in trouble in terms of your baby? I remember. And I'm kind of like, good grief. I am so head over heels attached. I'm in deep trouble, I'm on the road with this kid, that sort of thing. Attachment is meant to be very, very strong. And I mentioned oxytocin earlier. Oxytocin fuels that up. And men generally have much lower levels of oxytocin than women. Oxytocin is the trust hormone. It's what allows us to be open to relationships and other people. However, if a man is in a household where there's a woman who's pregnant and a baby is born, their oxytocin levels go up. That's how powerful it is. And I've seen some social studies and stuff. You can actually get, in research, you can get oxytocin in a nose spray. And you can test people out in terms of their reactions to one another, and then 15 minutes after they get the oxytocin, they're just calmer and they're more receptive and they're more understanding and they're more open to the relationship. And it's just kind of like, and you want to know, where can I get this and how much does it cost? I know that. But I say that just to say that attachment is meant to be powerful, and it does affect us in a very powerful way. And especially, we're connected and we want to be protective, aren't we? We're attached and we want to be protective of the child. After all, one of the things in Maria's book, The Child and the Family, she does a wonderful job of explaining how vulnerable the infant is compared to all other mammals and creatures on the planet. Very few, for as long, and they're so vulnerable, that sort of thing. So we want to get protective, and that's our initial orientation. And the problem is, I think, unwittingly, we get too focused on the attachment And we don't realize that there's another aspect of attachment, which is integral to it, it's complementary to it, which is letting go. What you're going to find in the world is that there are constant situations where you attach and then you let go. I have my postgraduate training is in Gestalt therapy, and this is a Gestalt kind of idea right here. But I make contact with the environment, I assimilate my knowledge of what's going on there, and then the Gestalt is formed. I've got a whole idea, and I move away, and then I'm ready for my next encounter. The image rises up from the ground. I make sense of it, and then the image disappears into the ground again. So attachment and letting go are integral to one another. Attachment is what gives us our sense of security. Letting go, and that's the parent letting go and the child letting go, as we talked about, is what gives us our sense of independence. Okay? But this process keeps going on again and again in our lives and in the child's life. So that's something I want to share about. And let's see.
I have a quick question.
Okay. Sure.
Because I remember, and even now, when my children are adults and they live on their own, I often struggle trying to decide which of the two options is the most beneficial for my child in this moment.
Right.
Should I protect them and make sure that they don't suffer the consequences of this choice, or should I let them go and let it be a life lesson?
Right.
So,
okay.
what advice do you have for parents?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a couple of things that I could share about that. That is, it's my favorite word is "and," because it pulls ideas together. And so what I want you to know in terms of attachment and letting go is that, one, it's attach and let go, not or let go. Right? And the next question I have is, what are we attaching to and what are we letting go of? Right? Well, we're not letting go of our love for the child, right? We're not letting go of our relationship to the child. What we're letting go of is a particular role with the child. And what I've noticed in myself and other parents is that we get attached to certain roles. That's why that attachment experience, sometimes we get so focused on protecting them that that's the only role that we have. And we don't realize, well, wait a minute, part of this is to let them have some space and to take some risk and to let them take some risk. Have you ever noticed that a toddler is learning to walk? They'll take a few steps, and what do? How are you doing, Mom? Are you okay? Am I okay? I mean, if you look worried, if you're okay, I'm okay. If you look like you're not okay, then I'm not sure I'm okay. So, but if the mom gives the thumbs up, proud, send postcards, have some fun. You've made it 4 feet down the couch, and maybe you'll make it across the room or something like that. So, I guess what I'm saying, that's another idea, that it's not, either or, it's both. And the next idea that I would say in terms of how to make that decision, there's an idea called scaffolding. And that basically says that we provide just enough support to allow them to complete their developmental task. Does it make sense? There's some things that infants do very repetitive. If you roll a ball over to them, they'll roll it back to you, right? That sort of thing. And there's sometimes all they need is a little help to complete the cycle, because their innate drive is to do things again and again and again and again and just get a big kick out of the whole thing, And so one idea that I would say is to offer just enough support to allow them to do what they need to do. And then get out of the way as soon as you can, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about attachment and letting go. Now let's talk about safety for a minute. The most important thing I would say about safety is that we tend to get really connected to this idea of protection, you know. And again, I get it. The child is so vulnerable in the initial stages of life that we're constantly meeting their physical needs and protecting them from protecting them from anything or anybody that could do them harm, that sort of thing. But the truth is, if we totally protect them, they don't have any sense of inner safety. And I see this is another one of those things that's true for adults. One of the things one of the most important things an adult can learn is that their safety is in here. It's not out there. They carry their safety with them. That's security. When we, outside safety is being protected from the obstacles and the difficulties of life. And we have a role to do that when they're 1 day old, right? We're going to provide all this outside safety. But our job as a parent is to prepare a child to live successfully in the world in which they're going to live. That's my definition of good parenting. Preparing your child to live successfully in the world they're going to live in. And here's what I want you to know. You won't always be there. You were never meant to be. You just won't be there. We're the luckiest generation on the planet. We get to live longer and to be around for more of it than any other generation. But we won't always be there. I'm a person who's had all my grandparents and both my parents pass away, and I heard the universe say, next. And that's exactly how I want it to be. Right? So I'm not going to be there always, and so I want the child to be prepared to live independently of me. Now, everybody wants to have fantasies of, what's going to happen, but okay, well so that's one I want to say. Outside safety is about being protected, but we want our children to develop this inside sense of safety. So let's look at this diagram. I'm really happy with it. Maggie Ward, I pitched some of these ideas to Charo, and I had the paradigm and I knew what I wanted to say, and Maggie came up with this circle of trust. So you see the circle of trust here. I will tell you that if I had my way, I just couldn't do this graphically. I have no IT skills whatsoever. But if I'd had my way, child trust parent would be at 12 o'clock. Parent trust self would be at 3 o'clock, right? You kind of see how it would be. But so the first thing that needs to happen is that the child needs to trust the parent. That's where all those mutual emotional reciprocal interactions go. That's where meeting all their physical needs come in. That was every time they cry, somebody comes and is interested and cares. And the child begins to trust the parent, and the child learns from the parent's emotional response and from their actions to trust and have hope about the world. A major milestone for the child. Second, the parent has to trust self. Now, I remember, my kids are in their mid-40s. We did the radical Lamaze stuff, that kind of jazz, and we still did it in the hospital. We had to fight them all the time. We were kind of these 60s radical kind of people, and we knew that they couldn't keep our baby even if we couldn't pay the bill. We knew that legally, so we can take the baby out of here, right? But we were ready to do it because I had about $10 in the bank when the babies were born, But when I had the baby at home, and I looked at this beautiful child in the bed. I thought, gee whiz. They let me have this baby. What am I going to do? How do I take care of this thing? You know, I'm thinking, what is the first poop going to be like? What do we do with the baby, you know, the belly button? What's going to happen there? I don't know what's going to happen there. You know, all this kind of stuff. But within a few days, because infancy is kind of like boot camp, isn't it? It's 24/7. Within a few days, I changed dozens of diapers. Are you kidding me? I wasn't even hurting myself anymore with the diaper pen, you know? And so I began to trust myself. And I learned from the child's responses that they are, you know, I'm meeting the child's needs. And that's a major milestone. I begin to have some confidence in myself. Next, parent has to trust the child. And that's where a parent acknowledges the competence that the child has. Right? And that's why I believe acknowledgement is so much better than praise. Because it signals to the child, hey, you got it. You got what it takes. You can handle it. And as the child begins to get those signals from me, the child trusts themselves. And the child learns from the parent's trust to have self-confidence in their ability to navigate life. Now that happens in the first week of life, in the first month of life, in the first year, in the first 3 years. It happens again all the time. That again, that's Tina's thing. The wheel just keeps turning here, you know. Keeps turning and gets more and more interesting and more complex. But it's the same thing again and again and again. So I think this model, and this is actually based upon something I use with adults, and it was the first time I actually thought, what if you laid this on top of the parent-child relationship? How would it look? And that's where I developed this model. I think it can be helpful because wherever you are with your child or whether your child is, you can begin to chart out what might be the problem. You know, am I not communicating enough trust in the child and so they don't have enough self-confidence? Is there a problem with me trusting myself? You know, that's where in my practice I work with people who don't trust themselves, right? I mean, and people make sense, and I find out what's going on here and how can we get around this, that sort of thing. And I do a lot of the things you saw tonight with them. I lend my neurological system to them. I understand. I believe in them. I voice confidence in them, and they begin to trust themselves. So I think this is an interesting little model that you can use to kind of see where am I with my child, and what might be the issue and the solution that you could use. So I know we probably have gone long enough, and any questions you have, I think that would be great.